So 10.2, we're looking at radical expressions still. And with radical expressions, the very first thing that they're going to have you do is that if you had something like the square root of 49, what they're going to tell you is that you can take something that's in square root form and rewrite it so it's in exponent form, or vice versa. So they're going to have you go back and forth on these. The very first thing that you have when you start breaking this part of it down is that you've got basically two parts of it here. That if you've got some exponent some form that you're looking at, if you've got x to some power, then your n basically is going to be your root out here. And that what they're going to tell you is that if you've got something that's in radical form, if you want to rewrite it in fraction form, that whatever power you have on the inside, you can take that and divide it by the root that's on the outside. So if you have something like the square root of 49, technically it's 49 to the first power. Now, we know what square root of 49 would be, but if they tell you just to rewrite it, if there's not a power, again, that's understood to be the second root. So if they ask you just to rewrite it from radical form to exponent form, that would be 49 to the 1/2 power. Now, and again, most of those, we really wouldn't have to do square root of 49 because that's one of those numbers you can just look at and tell me it's 7. But sometimes they're going to have you just kind of work through some problems and just have you think about ways to think about it and how to work it down. Here's probably a little better example. So let's say you had the 6th root of y to the 5th. So if they ask you just to rewrite it in exponent form, then again, whatever power you have on the inside, take that power and divide it by the root that's on the outside. And again, if there's not a power there, like we have with the 49, then you just assume that's to the first power. So that's probably the first thing they're going to have you do is just rewrite it. Now, again, if you've got something like where we had square root of 49, if they ask you to rewrite it, you'll do that. Most of the time, that one, they're going to ask you to simplify it. So that one, you can just go back and tell me that would equal 7. But more than likely, a lot of these are going to have you just go back and rewrite the different parts of it. So you can rewrite it in exponent form. Okay. On the flip side of it, they kind of go backwards. They'll give you a problem that's in exponent form. So you're doing x to the p over n power. We'll look at just the basics of it first. That if you have something like x to the p over n power, that again, just realize that the p is the power. And then the n in this case, that would be the root. So if they have you take this and rewrite it in radical form, again, it's just the opposite of what we were looking at. You would take whatever the x is, put the n, so it's on the outside, and then the p power would just stay there with the x. And for most of the problems, it's basically going to be one of those things that they're going to ask you, they're going to give you one or the other, and just have you write it the other way. So if you had 7 to the 2/3 power, they're going to ask you just to rewrite it in radical form. So you've got the 2 that would go on the outside. Sorry. 3 that would go on the outside. And then your 2 would go on the inside. If you had something like t to the 1/8 power, got your 8th root on the outside, you've got t to the 1st on the inside, and with that one being t to the 1st, you don't have to put the 1 because it's t to the 1st. So for that one, you can just do that as the 8th root of t. Okay, so first few problems, just having you rewrite, not really doing much with those parts. The next thing they're going to ask you to do is they're going to ask you to simplify, where you actually have to work a little bit of it out, actually get it down to a certain point, a certain value. And what they really should say is that if you get one of these, more than likely you're going to have to probably rewrite it in radical form. Because the way you've always been able to simplify different things, you've never looked at it in exponent form. We've always had it in radical form. Okay, let's give you one like this. So let's say you got 8 to the 1/3 power. And it may be one of those that when you start to do enough of them, you may start to see it, but most of the time, if you've got something that's in fraction form or exponent form, the easiest thing to do is just to rewrite in radical form. So if you do that, you've got the 3rd root of 8 to the 1st. And here's where you kind of have two options. You can either do the power part of it first. You could actually do 8 to the 1st power. Or you could kind of separate it up and do it this way. Think about it, that's 3rd root of 8 and then to the 1st power. That you can take the power that you have here, you can either put it on the inside or you can put it on the outside. And most of the time when you're doing these, if you're having to work it out by hand, it's probably going to be better to put this exponent that's here, the power, on the outside, because it's a smaller number to take the radical part of it. So if you did the 3rd root of 8, well, that would be 2. So that's just 2 to the 1st power. So that would be 2. Now, and for a problem like that, whether we're doing, if you do 8 to the 1st power, it's not going to change the answer. When you start looking at some of the numbers that might make it a little bit easier to kind of think about some parts over here, let's say we're going to do 32 to the 3/5 power. So first step is, if you rewrite it, that's the 5th root of 32. And again, you can put the 3rd on the inside, or let's take it, put the 3 on the outside. Because if you were to put the 3 on the inside, just going to do it on the side over here just so you can kind of see. If you do it on the inside, you've got to take 3 to the 3rd, or 32 to the 3rd, and multiply that and get some huge number, whatever it's going to be, 2,000. 800, 900, whatever that number is going to be, something in the thousands, and then you've got to take the 5th root of that number. If they have you work it off a little bit at a time, the easier thing though would be to do it this way, because if you do the 5th root of 32, you go back and check it, because again, if you're doing the 5th root, you're looking for groups of 5. If you took 32 and broke it down, it's 2 times 16, it's 2 times 8, 2 times 4, and then it's 2 times 2. you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2s. So you've got the fifth root of 2 to the fifth, and that entire thing is to the third power. So if you can take 32 and rewrite it as 2 to the fifth, your fifth root and your fifth power cancel each other out. That just leaves you with 2, and now you're just going to do 2 to the third power. So 2 times 2 times 2 will get you 8. So if you're working through these and trying to simplify the numbers down, probably the easiest thing to do is to take the root of the number first, get that down to a number, and then take that number and then do it to the power. If not, again, you're kind of going the opposite. You're going to do 32 to the third power. Then you got to take that number and break it down. If you did 32 to the third, that was 30. I was kind of off on my math a little bit there. 32,768. So if you want to start taking 32,768, start breaking it down, go ahead, knock yourself out. It's a lot easier to take 32 and break it down because the numbers are just that much smaller. Kind of think about that as being option 2. You could do the power first and then go back and do the radical. Okay, so let's do one. Let's do 100 to the 3 over 2 power. So if you rewrite it, it's the square root of 100 to the third power. And again, if you look at the square root of 100, that would just be 10. And then you can do 10 to the third power. 10 times 10 would be 100, times one more would put you up to 1,000. Yeah. So as you're working through these first ones, that's pretty much what they want you to do, to think about. That. Again, the biggest thing is they want you to rewrite it and then simplify it from there. Yes? Oh, that what we could do for that one with the 2, if you think about 100, that would be the same as 10 times 10. So if you think about it this way, where it's, probably should have put parentheses here. That's square root of 100, and then we're going to do that to the third power. So for that one, what we're going to do is we're going to break down what's on the inside there. So where we've got 100, we could rewrite that as 10 times 10, or make it 10 squared, and that way your 2's would cancel each other out. Your second root and your second power would cancel each other out, and then just leave you with 10 to the third power. Okay. And again, you can go different ways with that one, but most of the time, the thing you're going to do first is you're going to take the square root of that number, or in this case, square root of that number, and then once you've got the square root, then you can take that number and just do it to the power, make it go a little bit quicker. One thing to be careful of, and we'll go back more to the simplifying part than we have for these. Is that if they give you, actually it's the simplifying, hang on, wrong direction, so the rewriting part. And this is more of just some of the trick questions that you pop up. And notice one of these when I was going through some of the homework. If you have something that's again, we're going to ask you to rewrite this in exponent form. So you have 4 times the square root of x to the 7th. And this is one of those where you just have to be careful with how they've got this set up. That basically, you've got to think about it where there's the multiplication in the middle, that it's 4 times x to the 7th. that you can almost, if you put that dot in there to kind of give it that separation, the only thing you're going to have to simplify would be this part of it. The 4 is not under the square root, so it stays separate. So for this one, this would be x to the 7 divided by 2. Because again, if you've got square root, if there's nothing there, you can go back and just know that that's going to be a 2 for the square root part of it. Wait a minute, did it? Wait. Yeah. So we've got 4 times square root of x to the 7th. So if you rewrite it, it's just going to be the 4 off by itself, and then times x to the 7 divided by 2 power. Okay, so that's just one small thing to be careful of when you're going through those, because there may just be one kind of mixed in where you're having to do that if they give you a number that's out front, just ignore that number and just kind of leave it by itself. You only worry about the part that's got the square root or cube root or fourth root, whatever root they give to you. Just worry about that one little part that you have there. The difference is if they wanted the 4 on the inside, they would actually have put the 4 on the inside. So if it was 4x to the 7th power, then they'd actually have to rewrite it like that, where you've got the 4x to the 7th power. So then you would have 4x in parentheses to the 7 divided by 2 power. So that would be the difference of how you would want to look at those two things. If it's not underneath the radical, you don't have to rewrite it because that 4 is outside. If it is underneath the radical, then you pull the 4 in with the answer that you're looking for. So just one little small thing you may run across when you're going through some of these.